How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to a long-awaited supporters club. It's been a little while since I brought you guys a supporters club and I brought a few of the regulars back, so I hope you're going to enjoy. First things first, hit the like button. It's the midway stage of the season. Arsenal top of the league after 19 games played, 5 points clear with a game in hand. And as you can see to my right, I have a couple of legends in the building. Chris Hudson. What are you saying, Chris? You all good?
Well, yeah, I'm all right, mate.
Sheroy?
Starting to dream.
Yeah?
Starting to dream.
I think we all are starting to dream. I think people started dreaming earlier in the season. People have started dreaming now. The end is in sight. It's the business end of the season now. We've played 19 games. Just to remind the people, this is being recorded before the Manchester City game in the FA Cup. We're going to touch in on that. But when you guys and girls out there are watching this, that result and that game would have played out. So we'll see where we're at. But first things first, we start with the league. Chris, how you feeling, man?
I'm feeling ecstatic. The last time I come on here, one of my big fears was post-World Cup blues. Would we hit the ground running? They've just been fantastic.
Yeah.
Since that first game out of the World Cup, we're playing football that I haven't seen Arsenal play possibly the prime Wenger years.
Yeah.
The atmosphere at the stadium is wonderful. It's so good that I'm scared.
We're too good to be true.
Basically, I'm waiting for something. Something's got to go wrong soon. But you know, that's me.
It's not often that teams go through a season without having that lull. But if you look at recent years with Manchester City and Liverpool, 90 points, 100 points, going head to head throughout the season up until the last game a couple of times, that has somewhat become the standard. Sheroy, I want to ask you how you're feeling and whether we can maintain this standard moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously I feel great. And in terms of maintaining the standard going forward, it depends on how you look at the lull. Because the lull for us last season was losing in clusters of 3, right? Which is devastating. Yeah. Arguably, the lull for us this season could have been losing to Manchester United, but we immediately bounced back.
A draw to Southampton.
A draw to Southampton, bounce back. A draw to Newcastle. Don't just bounce back, but bounce back emphatically with an away North London derby win and a real crunch game against Manchester United. So, I mean, I've had this conversation with a few people and they've said, well, I want to see how Arsenal cope when things get tough. Is it beyond comprehension that they may have already got tough, but we dealt with it? I understand that there are a few more difficult games to come. We do have to play City twice. We do have to go to Anfield. But look, this might come back and bite me in the arse, but looking at City, dropped points to Everton, got beaten by Brentford, got dumped out of a cup by Southampton, got beaten by Manchester United when they were leading in that game. You cannot deny that this is not necessarily the same relentless Man City that we have seen in previous years. Do they have the capability to switch it on? Yes. But right now, the brand of football that we play and the relentless, unwavering belief in our philosophy, that does not look like dissipating. And that's why I'm beginning to dream.
Listen, a few years ago under Unai Emery, I remember Fulham away, I was there. We've got our Arsenal back, and I think that was just a bit of a relief that we kind of moved on from the Wenger era and it just felt fresh and we was on an unbeaten streak, but it didn't turn out to be what we thought it was. Have we got our Arsenal back now, or is it still early days, Chris?
No, I think we got it back.
I agree.
Not just on the pitch, off the pitch. Their transfer dealings, they're doing things a little bit more clever. You've only got the connection between the fans and the team is just amazing. I've never seen that, Mark. Even during the glory days, I've never seen such a connection, mate.
Yeah,
so it's wonderful.
It's been a long while. Sheroy, does it feel like we've got our Arsenal back? And by that, I don't mean we're going to go on and win the league and that is the deciding factor whether we have our Arsenal back, because there's no divine right to win when you have so many teams competing. But as an Arsenal fan, I think there's a divine right to challenge, compete. And it looks like that's what we're doing this season and headed into doing for the future few years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing about that is it's very easy for Arsenal fans to feel like they have their Arsenal back, but it's also important, in my eyes anyway, for other clubs to fear as though Arsenal are back, right? So one brilliant metric for me is always speaking to opposition fans that have gone to the Emirates. All right, and one of my closest friends whose footballing opinion I value highly is a Manchester United fan. He was at the Emirates on the weekend. And he messaged me before kickoff and said, this is scary. They went 1-0 up, we spoke at half-time, and he messaged me and said, if you want this, you're going to get it, because he could feel it. And when he left, he said, I haven't seen anything like this in my adult life. And that's coming from someone who goes to Old Trafford quite regularly. You know, so that the people are feeling it not just inside the club, but also as outsiders looking in. And in terms of getting our Arsenal back, I mean, I've said this a lot on a lot of shows, and I keep repeating it, but it's because it's true. It's sort of like, I'm going to keep saying it like Eddie Hearn when he reels off Anthony Joshua's resume in every interview. But we, as Arsenal fans, were aligned with a particular style of football. All right, that's something that we've always said. And whenever certain managers were brought into the conversation, there was always he's not going to play the Arsenal way. People were questioning Mikel Arteta's style of football. No one's questioning it now. Yeah. It is relentless, unwavering belief in your principles and attacking football. One, do we have our Arsenal back in terms of cohesion within the fan base? I mean, again, I do attribute a lot of that to Mikel Arteta. Even little things that people may have said were quite gimmicky, like the North London Forever song and making sure the team were on board with it. But look at how that kicks off now. Yeah. You know, look at how that kicks off. There is that real sense of community between the fans and the players. Again, we have never been, when I say our Arsenal, I've never really associated us with buying an entire team of proven talent. We have created our own stars, as cliche as it sounds. We've done that historically, and we're doing that now. We're bringing through Hale boys that are decimating the teams at the top. We're also buying promising young youth with sprinkles of experience, you know. And what the other thing that I always associated with our Arsenal was physical tenacity. When I think of Keown, when I think of Vieira, when I think of Adams, I think, if I'm getting into a fight, I want them behind me. And now I can look at Kieran Tierney, I can look at Granit Xhaka, I can look at Zinchenko, I can even look at people like Bukayo Saka now, you know, strong boys, strong men. We don't get pushed around anymore. Gabriel, these are men. So yes, in my opinion, we are getting our Arsenal back, but it's not short-term Arsenal. This is building for the future. You look at the age profile, you look at the value that's now going to be attributed to these players. Yeah. Something that Chris always touches on and you always touch on is, of course, we have to tie down some important contracts. But I have full faith that will happen, and that's why I like this. It's a plan for the long term, right? One of my favourite MCs, Akala, he always said, take shortcuts, get cut short, long road, hard road, but the most short. He said that in one of his Fire in the Booths, and that resonates with me because there are other teams around us that may well have taken the short route, 100 mil here, 100 mil there. We've taken the slightly longer route, but it looks like it's paying off.
And there's a great hunger amongst the support. Yeah. You think we've gone through a lot of crap in the last 18 years. You think, and we've had to taken out of us. We've been some humiliating results. So suddenly we've got this wonderful team, and the hunger amongst the supporters, not just young kids, all ages. I'm 65, and I'll give anything to see Arsenal win the title again. Yeah. It's we've got, you know what I mean? It's come on.
Yeah, and you know, Sheroy mentioned Mikel Arteta, and I do want to touch on Mikel. Maybe not just touch on Mikel, because at the end of the day, most of this is attributed to him. Since he's come in, he's made so many changes to the personnel, and Fabregas talking on the weekend about the training ground and how that looks so different to what he remembered. And I've said it before, I say it again, when you listen to Ronaldo's interview with Piers Morgan in December about Man United and the lack of change and the lack of development in the training ground area and so on, and you compare that to what Fabregas has been saying about Arsenal and what's happening behind the scenes, talking to the staff saying, you know, the majority of this, 90% of this is due to Mikel Arteta. I also hear that he's got an empty trophy cabinet.
I love that.
Yeah, that's motivational techniques. Even in the All or Nothing, Chris Sheroy, there was that scene where he played "You'll Never Walk Alone," and you know, at the time, even now looking back, a lot of people laughed at it. But you could see what he was trying to do with that moment, and over time, he's built this hunger. He's built this winning mentality. Zinchenko came out after the United game, and he said in December, he turned around to the squad and said, "Stop talking about top 3, top 4. Let's talk about the title." He said a few of the players laughed. He said they're not laughing now. So all in all, everyone's moving in the right direction. You mentioned support and how big the Ashburton Army has been for this. And the club have worked with the Ashburton Army on, you know, displays and allowing them to do what they need to do to improve the atmosphere at the Emirates. So on Mikel Arteta, Chris, give us your thoughts on him. Has he entered that top managerial bracket? And by top, I don't mean the Pep Guardiolas, because there's so much depth to what Pep Guardiola's done over the years.
I'll tell you where I am with Arteta. I think he's a modern day manager in a modern day game. Yeah. When I watch Arsenal play football, and then I watch other teams, we're on another level.
It's refreshing.
It's just wonderful. And the little thing about Arteta, if he was here, he'd also say, his people, his backroom staff, his coaches, Albert, people like that. It's all part of it, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's just revolutionised the club.
And you mentioned how he's a new philosophy, new manager in that sense. And I think over the years, towards the end of Wenger's reign, even under Unai Emery, we didn't really get an insight at our club about the new football, modern day football, and how things can work. I'm going to use the left back as an example because Kieran Tierney, I love Kieran Tierney, and he comes across as an old school type of fullback, you know, one from the 90s, one from the early 2000s, something that resonates with me. But what Zinchenko's come in and done with Arteta's, you know, philosophy and the way modern day football works, the free role used to be for number 10s in football, and that's what I remembered. But now I'm seeing a free role from a left back position that has opened my eyes. I've watched Man City do it over the years. I've watched Barcelona and Pep with Bayern Munich and even Liverpool to an extent as well.
White Hart Lane, he was amazing.
Yeah, well, against United too, man of the match he got. So,
wonderful.
Sheroy, I can't even ask you how important Mikel's been to this because he is the key behind all of this. But thoughts on Mikel Arteta and how far he's taken us?
Yeah, I mean, the Fabregas stuff that you mentioned was important for me because even if there are improvements at a club, it can sometimes be attributed to certain members of the backroom staff and members of the board or whatever, sort of looking at it as a conglomerate. But Fabregas was quite upfront about the fact that the staff said, well, no, 95% of this is because of Mikel.
Yeah.
People don't just say that, man. People don't just say that, you know, and that aligns squarely with, excuse me, that aligns squarely with all of his messages of intent from the outset. And what comes with Arteta, and one thing I really liked, this stems from his press conference for this FA Cup match. They asked him, they said, does it make it awkward for you that your opponent is Pep Guardiola? And Arteta said, look, it's not awkward for me because he will never sort of lose any value as a professional part of my development and a personal part of my development. But what I also feel is that what's best for him is not what's best for me. So I wish I didn't have to do this to him. I wish it was someone else. That level of belief, to go up against your mentor and say, you know what, I wish it wasn't you. I'm coming out with the lyrics today.
It has to be.
Yeah, you would have definitely heard this. Remember Nas, in Nas's Like, one of my favourite lyrics, he says, much success to you, even if you wish me the opposite, because sooner or later we'll all see who the prophet is.
Yep.
Immediately when I heard that, I thought of that bar and I thought the level of confidence in this man, you know, is incredible. So going back to what you were saying about has he reached that elite level, look, I mean, obviously, he's only won an FA Cup. He's not been a manager for that long. People are always going to level that at you. But let's say you started watching football last year. We don't even have to go with this year. Mm-hmm. Let's say you started watching football last year and you heard what people were saying about the level of squad was at, where they may have finished the year before and the year before that. And you look at how close we came to top 4 last year. You then look at what we're doing this year and who we're challenging and the brand of football we're playing. If someone who was watching that didn't understand the trophy cabinets that some of these other managers have, would they put Mikel Arteta at the top of the list? Arguably, they would maybe say, well, he looks better than this Jurgen fellow, or this Pep guy looks all right, but Mikel just pips him, or yeah, this Ten Hag guy's good, but you know he's had a couple of questionable results here and there. I heard a bit about this Potter guy, but that's not really working out. If they were looking at it in isolation, I understand that you can't because these guys have track records that are to be respected, which is why he's not yet in the conversation.
Yeah.
But based on current form, I think the question answers itself.
Eyes are on us, eyes are on him. I've held my hands up about Mikel many times this season. I've held my hands up about Granit Xhaka this season too. One name, one family I haven't held my hands up over, the Cronkays. And listen, the reason I haven't done that yet is because it's the windows that I look at for the Cronkays. It's the behind the scenes stuff, and Fabregas has delved a bit into that. And again, similar with being patient with Mikel Arteta and riding with him through that terrible patch that he had at Arsenal with the results. I've given credit to the Cronkays for that. I'm also going to give them credit for the backroom stuff, what Fabregas said about renovating, you know, and backing Mikel Arteta's not just philosophy on the pitch, but his philosophy off it too, with the staff and the facilities and so on. But Chris, how do you feel about the Cronkays now? I'm not saying they've done enough to turn around our opinions of them, but are they on the right track in doing just that?
I think they are. I think they're backing him. They've backed him in the windows. They've backed him in this window. They'll be very interested between now and Tuesday. If they really back him for a midfield player.
How important is that?
Massive. If anything was to happen to Partey or Xhaka, I'll be very worried.
With El Nene out now as well.
But I don't know what they're going to do here. Are they going to go? Will they go big time, thinking should we save our money to the summer? But it's now, isn't it? We're
not thinking about the summer yet, are we?
Summer's another world.
Yeah.
So it was going to be a very interesting 3 or 4 days in the window, I think.
And Mikel's also alluded to needing another
I think
midfielder.
if he says, can you pay 100 million for Mr. X, I think they'd pay it.
Yeah?
Yeah. But unfortunately, Mr. X, we can't get out of his club till the summer. So.
Yeah, so it's a waiting game on that. Sheroy, similar question to you on the Kroenkes. You know, Arteta's turned it around. Certain players have turned it around in Granit Xhaka, even Eddie Nketiah most recently. Have the Kroenkes turned it around yet in terms of your opinion of them? Because over the years, we've thought very similarly in how they've managed the club, how they've kind of left it to the side and focused on other endeavours. It does seem now that they brought the right man in, they supported the right man, and behind the scenes, they seem to be doing the right things too.
Yeah, look, I mean, just because they're doing good things now doesn't necessarily make people wrong about their opinion of the Kroenkes in years gone by.
Yep.
I find it very strange, and I think this is probably a byproduct of the online community and the social media community making sure that you're in one camp or another. I've never really been a fan of that. And the example that I would use is, look, if I've been married for 5 years, but I cheated on my wife for the first 4, but I then became a wonderful husband in the last year, that doesn't necessarily mean I was a wonderful husband in the first 4.
Yeah.
You know, I've just managed to rectify the situation.
Your wife's not going to hold her hands up and say, no, he's been great the whole time.
Exactly. And I don't see why the same logic can't be applied here. That being said, if we're talking about Mikel Arteta coming in and wanting to ensure that the stadium looked a certain way and the training ground had a certain level of investment, and terminating contracts, not selling players, terminating contracts, making real losses to get characters out of the club, some of whom were on bumper contracts and were your captain, all right? These are all things that do need board approval. Yeah. So insofar as that goes, they could have hampered Mikel Arteta a lot more by simply refusing or not engaging, but they haven't done that. So credit to them. I'm not going to sit here and sort of harbour an unnecessary grudge because of things gone by. That being said,
we want them to change.
Correct. We've always wanted to be wrong about that. No one wants Arsenal to fail solely that they can say I was right about the board.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, I don't know anyone that comes from that camp. It's ridiculous. But going forward, I think football fans were inherently greedy sometimes. But I can only look at what certain other ownerships have done with regard to, if your manager identifies a player and what's at stake is potentially the Premier League, you move heaven and earth to get that player. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, the Mudryk deal, I'm not as concerned because I don't think that position was going to be season defining, particularly because, I'll give them credit, adequate backup. I like Trossard.
Yeah.
Maybe not the rockstar marquee signing, definitely improves the squad, definitely gives us another option. Fantastic. And we already had a decent backup options in that position, in my opinion. What Chris says about the midfield, that is season defining if it goes wrong. Make no mistake.
Yeah.
Thomas Partey out of that team, El Neni injured, and we don't get the right candidate in there, I'm sorry, but this season could fall to shit very quickly. And I think everyone's identified that. The manager has publicly come out and said, look, we need cover in that midfield. This market is very complicated. But again, looking at the amount of funds that they were willing to front for Mudryk and what we subsequently spent, which has been nowhere near that, you would like to think that there is money in the pot, you know? And if we want to start talking about ourselves as elite teams, and particularly if the Kroenkes want to consider themselves elite owners, I feel like I've said this before, but the best boxers, when they're in the ring, even if your plan is to take it 12 rounds, if you see the knockout there, you take it.
Yeah.
You take it. You get your opponent out of the ring. And that, for me, is what this window embodies. You know, so I'm very curious to see how it pans out. Fingers crossed.
And to be honest, on the flip side, listen, I can give the Kroenkes credit for some of the things they've done over the years now. But we went for Douglas Luiz in the last day of the summer transfer window. So why has it taken so long in January to address the area? If we are even going to address it, why has it taken Mikel Arteta to say it? And these are the questions I have in regards to making a decision whether the Kroenkes have really turned the corner or whether it's a bit of the same old. And by same old, I mean, my initial frustrations with Arsenal came, selling Van Persie to United, being happy with the top 4 finishes. You look at Van Persie's letter saying, I went in to talk about ambitions of the club, and they showed me the bottom line figures. And players are not interested in those figures. If you're a player like him, if you're a player like, I assume, Saka and Partey, Xhaka, Saliba, and so on, they're not interested in the numbers and the profit the club is making. They're more interested in the ambitions of the club and being part of something special. So there is some doubt there for me, because midfield was an area that the club admitted needed addressing itself by going for Douglas Luiz, but still being a bit laboured in this market so far, with only a few days. By the time this video comes out, it's going to be, 4 or 5 days left of the window. So fingers crossed we do something, because I agree with Sheroy in the sense that it's a season-defining position now. The last 2 seasons, a Partey injury cost us heavily, coupled up with a Kieran Tierney injury. We addressed the left-back situation now, and I'm more than happy in the full-back positions and in other positions. I like the Trossard signing too. It isn't that big-profile Mudryk, young player coming in to take over for the next decade. It's a signing for now. It's a signing that adds depth, a player that knows the Premier League, and I like that. You couple that with Kivior, a backup to Gabriel. There's now depth in that position too, because that was one of the positions that we didn't have a left-sided centre-back in. So the club are doing what they need to do slowly but surely, but the midfield is definitely an area we need to address. I've mentioned Xhaka, and I've mentioned how he's turned it around this season. Me and you done a show on my channel, and me, you, Sharky and Babs, we talked about the season so far as well. We talked about players of the season. I mentioned Xhaka, you mentioned Odegaard, Partey was mentioned, Saka was mentioned, Zinchenko was mentioned. Chris, if you had to pick one player this season that you believe has been the catalyst to this, you believe has been so important to this side being top of the Premier League, who would that was? It's a very difficult question, because it's not just one player.
It's hard, but I'm going to shock you. I'm going to go for Nketiah.
Yeah?
Because we lost Jesus and everyone panicked. What are we going to do?
Me included.
Yeah. Well, most 95% of every Arsenal fan. We got to go and spend big. But no. He steps up to the plate, and what a fantastic tribute to Arteta, because he has had so much faith in him. He gave him that massive contract, and you can tell how well he's been coached.
Yeah.
The Nketiah you're watching now is not the Nketiah even of last. He can hold the ball up.
Yeah.
I mean,
psychologically, mentally.
The goal we got against Man United was out of good Muller. And if I said that to you 2 years ago, I'd have been locked up.
I would have been on the phone, mate.
Get him off his chair. You know what he's talking about? That is so good, Muller. But his goal, how about his goal against West Ham?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's leading the line. So for me, he's Eddie, but in brackets, from day one, is Odegaard.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask you and stick with you, Chris, on that one, because we've talked about Mikel and how much faith and support and trust the Kroenkes put in him. Last year, Mikel got his contract off the back of, I believe it was 3 defeats. And Mikel came out in the press conference and said, listen, this is surprising. For me to get offered a new contract shows how much they believe in me. You've mentioned Nketiah, I've mentioned Xhaka. And that's a similar situation where Arteta's believed in them and shown faith. How much does faith and belief from the person above you improve your fortunes, improve your...
Well, you've only got, possibly in my working life, when I'm retired now, but when I used to, if you knew that the boss above you really liked you, you always gave that little bit extra, and you would dare not let him down.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Eddie.
Yeah, give you the confidence to make mistakes but bounce back.
I can't let this man down. He's given me a contract. He's turned my career around. Now, have they talked about him getting called up for England? Please God, no.
Yeah, I know how you feel about that. I know you.
That's another story.
Yeah,
it's just, I think it's fancy. It's one of the great stories, mate.
That's
Eddie.
A good shout, though. You know, I can't argue that, because when Jesus did get injured, I thought just our luck.
Everyone did.
He starts one game for Brazil, and he's out 3-4 months. What kind of luck is that for Arsenal?
And here's a question: when he's fit, does he walk straight back in?
On this form that Eddie's in, no. Obviously, Jesus is the better player, but on this form, you cannot deny Eddie Nketiah. Exactly.
We're talking about please God winning the league, but really, someone who's seen Arsenal win the league 5 times. It's when you get to those 10 matches at the end of the season.
Yes, yeah.
And that's when that starts happening. You're nervous.
Yeah, yeah.
But and you say he comes on with 20 minutes to go, bang, 1-0, see you later.
See you later indeed, Sheroy. You wanted to jump in there.
Just on that, if Eddie continues with this goal-scoring form, Gabriel Jesus was definitely bought knowing that he would be starting, all right? He has an inherently competitive edge. Mm-hmm. He came here to lead the line. He is going to come on, and he will now know that he's not a guaranteed starter, and he has to score to displace Eddie.
Yeah.
Yeah? What happens there? Net benefit Arsenal. Mm-hmm. You know, and competition for places is huge. Ben White said it post-match. I think it was after Tottenham. It was after Tottenham. It was on one of those interviews that you had to find online because it wasn't on terrestrial TV here or whatever. But they said, what makes a good dressing room? And because people keep referring to you having a good dressing room. And he said, look, the first thing is that we're all genuinely mates and we love working together as a group. But the second is all of us who are starting know that we feel lucky to be starting because we know that there's someone on the bench in our position that could feasibly be starting in this team. That, for me, at the start of the season, wasn't the case up front. Yeah. I thought Jesus is fit, Jesus starts, you know, and it's still not the case in Partey or Xhaka's position, mm-hmm. and maybe even Saka's position.
Yes.
Yeah, there are still a handful, right? But that's what this squad development is about, and it can't be done wholesale, it can't be done overnight, but we're getting in the right direction. So the Eddie story is wonderful, but I love the role reversal. And even hungrier Jesus, someone who's better than what we saw at the beginning. I mean, you know, come on, I can't wait to see that.
The right pieces. And I remember when we spoke during the World Cup Supporters Club week in, week out, we talked about the contracts and you mentioned the contracts already today. And I think I definitely said I'm more confident about Martinelli and Saka's contracts because of, you know, some of the things they've said and how much I believe that they're happy at the club. It's the one that I do doubt is Saliba. But recently Saliba's come out and said, listen, the contract negotiations, they're being run right now. I'm very happy at this club and more or less said I want to secure my future at this club. So even down to that, everything just seems to be going in the right direction. Everything from the fans, the club, the back room, the training facilities, the results on the pitch, bouncing back from poor results, United, Newcastle, Southampton across the season. Long may it continue. This Friday, we play against, you know, the team that have dominated the league over the last 5-6 years. The team that are the defending champions, the team that are looking to catch us in the league, Manchester City, the team that have the manager that tutored Mikel over the years. How important is this FA Cup game? Because the way I look at it is, I love the FA Cup. You know, Arsenal are perennial winners of the FA Cup. Record winners of the FA Cup. But this season, it just feels like we're on the cusp of something a bit more special, and that's a return to Premier League champions. Is this more a warm-up, a test run for the Premier League game in a couple of weeks against Manchester City? Or is this one that you guys want to go all in for, play a strong team, play all your cards on the table, considering we've got a 7-day break before Everton away next Saturday, and really go for it and you know, put the first nail in the coffin this season for Manchester City, Chris?
Yeah, I'll go for it. I'll play my strongest team.
Yeah.
And I'll really go for it. Psychologically, if you go up there and do them, it's going to be on their mind, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But I suppose we'll find that when we see the team he puts out.
What do you think he'll do?
I think he'll put a strong team. I think there might be a little bit, you might have Trossard.
Okay.
He might change the centre half. He might play not Upson. You might play Rob Holding. You might play Turner. But I still think I don't think he'll want to go up there and lay down and die.
And how do you think Pep will face up against us? Strong?
I think he'll go strong because what I've just said, he want to do as well. So it's going to be interesting.
Set the precedent from the first game of potentially 3. If we draw the game, it's a replay.
We don't want that.
That's why
no club wants a replay.
No, not where we are right now with the Finn squad. Sheroy, how do you think Arteta's going to set up? How important is this game this Friday? What do you think Pep's going to do?
2 managers that want to win everything. And that's just ingrained in their DNA.
One's more equipped to win
Correct.
everything.
And I think that Arteta knows, even if Pep rotates, he puts out an 11 that could look like a Premier League first 11.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned about the psychological impact of this game on the league than I am about getting knocked out of the FA Cup. But the reality of the situation is, if we go strong enough to not have any psychological detriment on the league, the chances are we could go through. So it benefits on 2 prongs. Now, one thing that everyone keeps emphasising is momentum. And a lot of people can say, yeah, Premier League momentum is perhaps distinct from your momentum in cups because we've seen teams that aren't doing well in the Premier League go and win the Champions League historically or whatever. Fine, not when it's a two-horse race. Not when it's a two-horse race, because it doesn't matter what competition you're in. You know that in the run-in you're going to have to go to that ground. You know that these are the guys that are on your tails. You know, Mikel Arteta, he began his press conference for that preview by saying, Manchester City, in my opinion, are the best team in the world. All right? That could be for one of two reasons. One, coming from a place of deference, knowing that if we lose, he's called them the best team in the world. I think it's more likely the second, which is he believes that we're going to win. And if and when we win, he wants to be able to go into his dressing room and say, well, you know I think they're the best team in the world, and you just did them. So that enhances the belief of these players. Belief is a word that he hones in on so much. And the more that belief grows and the more that momentum grows, I start dreaming even more.
I hear you. Another motivational technique in the back pocket from him. 19 games to go. I won't ask about the league yet, but top 4 must be secured. Champions League football back at the Emirates next season.
Well, I hope so. Oh, God.
Yeah, almighty collapse if it wasn't, but...
No, I don't even think, I think we're safely say Champions League money, that means as well.
That's the important thing. And that's going back to the Kroenkes. That's where the measuring stick comes back out and what they do with that money, that exposure. Because years gone by in the Champions League, year in, year out, they didn't really use that to build and develop a side that can potentially compete for Champions League, compete for the Premier League. So I want to see that back, not just for selfish reasons, hearing the Champions League music at the Emirates again, seeing the big clubs around Europe again, but more so the money that comes in and what we can do with the attraction again of the Champions League. But we'll see, because at this moment in time, the top 2 are, there's a difference between the top 2 and the rest just below them. You mentioned before the show started, a lot of people are trying to look at this Arsenal season and compare it to Leicester's season. But you said that Leicester at this point had
39 points.
What Newcastle and United have in third and fourth.
50.
It's a lot more comparable to Liverpool's title winning season than it is Leicester's. I think that Liverpool's title winning season showed the quality, showed the ability, and kind of set the precedent moving forward for Liverpool. And Leicester's was kind of like a flash in the pan. No disrespect to that Premier League win. It was massive. It was a flash in the pan. Sheroy, you already mentioned that we've set up for the future now, but Chris has also mentioned we can't think about the summer yet, let alone next season, because we've got a job to do this season. Is this our best chance? Is now the time to take the chance rather than, worry about where we're potentially going?
I'd have to say yes, because we know that Chelsea have just spent enough to perhaps buy a country. Yeah, so they're probably,
not wrong.
Yeah, they're probably going to be there or thereabouts, because regardless of the fact that the volume of signings might dilute people's fear as to the quality of them, some of them are very, very good players. And if that goes right, they're probably somewhere up there. Now, regardless of what I think about Manchester United and their fan base, because let me be clear, I can't stand them, Ten Hag has done a good job.
Yeah.
Ten Hag has done a good job. They look like they're en route to something. You can never write Manchester City off. Newcastle, with the amount of money they haven't really spent yet, and they're still doing very well. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't buy a goal against Newcastle. They're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they start spending, they will no doubt be up there. I may regret saying this, but I do worry about Liverpool in terms of how that rebuild is going to go. Questions over the manager, questions over an ageing squad, ownership's a bit up in the air. I might be wrong, but that's one that at this point in time I'm slightly less worried about. So you sit there and you think like that, and you think, well, we have to take our chance this year. But when we lost out on the Champions League last year, I sat there and said, no, man, but Tottenham now have Conte, and they've got the Champions League pool. And then I looked at their window, and there were a lot of players that I thought we could have done with. I would have happily taken Basuma at that point in time. I thought Kulusevski was fantastic, and whether he was backup or starting ahead of Saka, whatever you want to have that debate, fine. He would have been a fantastic player in there. Bentancur could have addressed the position at our midfield. They made some astute signings. Where are they in the top 4 discussion now? The thing is, with the Premier League, you have to expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
All right. So I can't definitively sit here and say if we don't win the league this year, it's never going to happen, because I felt as though missing out on top 4 last year could have been catastrophic, but now we're at the top of the league. But one thing I do think is important.
Don't think too far ahead, basically.
Exactly. You can only focus on the immediacy. And that's what I like about the recruitment. Left centre-back was an important position. We recruited there. It wasn't a position I expected to address in January.
True.
If I'm being honest with you. We were linked with Fresneda at right back. Again, I'm sitting there thinking, we do have Ben White and Tomiyasu. You know, we didn't have to let Cedric go. So he is still trying to level up. Which leads me to believe that this midfielder has to come in. Because he will have then addressed every gaping hole in the squad that was identifiable, giving us the best chance going into this. I was going to call it a run-in, it's not, it's the second half of the season.
Yeah.
But going into the second half of the season, you know, which is why I'm not too worried about the intent that the club's in or Arteta's in this window. I'm just worried about whether they can get it done in an ultra-competitive market.
Cool. Before we wrap up, Chris, any final words?
Just keep the faith.
Yeah, it's proven strong so far.
Trust the process.
Yeah, I think we're all on board with that now. Even me.
Brilliant.
Sheroy, final words?
Final words, honestly, I'm grateful to even be in the conversation, because I've said this to you before, when it's approaching a year since I came on this channel, and at that point I just wanted to be competitive against the big 6 teams at home. I just wanted to be in a top 4 conversation, and I'd come to terms with the fact that we may lose out. We're now out of nowhere. It's taken me by surprise, taken you by surprise. People are talking about us as title contenders. And no one really wants us to do it. And I don't think there's any bigger testament to that than the fact that there were more people on certain platforms talking about Manchester United's potential title challenge than ours, despite the fact that we've been at the top of the league for the vast majority of this season. So it seems as though people either don't believe or they don't want it to happen. Humility is in the air for a lot of these other clubs. You know, it really is. We were just speaking to a very prominent Manchester United fan and Tottenham fan outside who are filming nearby. All I could smell was humility from those two, right? And I think that it is important for Arsenal fans to also try and retain that element of humility, because we haven't achieved anything yet. But the manager says we haven't achieved anything yet. All of us understand that. But that doesn't take away from the fact that what is happening now is special. The results are special. The style of football is special. The characters are special, not just on the pitch, but also in the dugout. You know, long may it continue.
Sheroy, thank you. Chris, thank you as always. Listen, people, this has been another Supporters Club. I hope everyone out there has enjoyed. Give us your thoughts in the comment section below. Give us your final words heading into the last 19 games of the season in the comment section. We've got a big tie against Man City coming up. Like I said, by the time this is out, we'll know whether we're through in the FA Cup, whether it's a replay, or whether we've been knocked out. But all eyes, for me, are on the league. So we'll see what we're going to do then. Everton away next. Hit the like button. Let's get up to 1,000 real quick. Love for the lovers always, and tune in again soon for the more content coming thick and fast. Make sure you're subscribed, notification bell on. Love for the love, people. Peace.
Shop for AFTV merch at shop.aftv.co.uk. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, and Twitch. We've got content for every platform, so check it out.